The tears aren't coming. The tears just aren't coming.
Okay.
Just to be clear, it looks like he's dead or he is dead.
It just looks like he's dead. He's got, like, blue paint on him or something. But he's going to be fine.
What is wrong with you?
Doctor!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Welcome back to the channel. It's been an exciting 24 hours. Just thinking about all the things that have changed here in the industry. And I've been very blessed to cover comic books and associated, kind of related topics here for the last few years on the channel every single day. And, I've been waiting for some of this stuff to really happen. And, kind of was thinking about all the things that had changed recently. And it's really kind of mind-blowing. And if you're a big fan of comic books and you haven't been coming to Thinking Critical YouTube, you should definitely check us out. Subscribe to the channel. I think you'll like the content. I've also got a podcast where a lot of these segments end up being rebroadcast if you prefer to listen in your car or something like that. But definitely stick around, and I think you'll enjoy the content here. But getting back to the subject at hand, which is the massive amount of change that we're experiencing in comic books. It's really the pandemic has led to all this. And I remember when the pandemic shutdown happened, Perch and I sat down and we talked about it in a few segments, kind of understanding that everything has changed. The comic book game is changing. The comic book game has changed, but not knowing exactly how that was going to look or what was changing. Were we going to lose half the comic shops in North America due to the shutdown? Were we going to lose multiple publishers because of the shutdown? Were DC and Marvel going to maybe go more digital as far as their strategies? Were they going to start reprinting where they would cut some costs? We had no idea, but we knew something was changing and that the pandemic shutdown was going to radically speed up that process, which is something that was needed in comic books. It certainly had kind of grown stagnant. The big two are so risk averse. They're no longer the market leaders. They do nothing interesting as far as change anymore. Their version of change is what kind of cover gimmick can we do now? Are 3D covers back in style? Lenticular covers. What kind of covers can we do? Should we do throwback covers? That's Marvel and DC kind of trying to enact change in today's comic market. It's pathetic. And there hasn't been a lot of good, meaningful change in comic books in a while. And we're experiencing it at a very rapid pace. Creators are now seeing, based on what they're seeing as far as the sales in manga, YA graphic novels, that the big two are holding them back. And the big two themselves are changing. Just think about DC Comics has experienced the most change in affections this year. Obviously, the Dan Didio firing happened before the pandemic. But then after that, because of the shutdown, 2 major rounds of restructuring and firings because of all the money that was being lost at Warner Media with movie theaters being shut down and everything. Almost their entire editorial staff gutted. The second round saw them lose so many executives with long-term comic experience. It ended up being hundreds upon hundreds of years of experience, like Bobby Chase out the door. People that you need in your company that really know comic books, all shown the door. And we saw that they decided in order to cut costs, they needed to start importing new comic creators, a host of no-name talents. A lot of them had been doing some screenwriting, maybe for their streaming shows, maybe cartoons or whatever. And they just started importing them in, and you've seen this mass exodus of amazing creators. Mariko Tamaki is on Detective Comics. That's how desperate DC Comics has gotten to save money. They couldn't afford to put anybody good on Detective Comics. Now, what if you say, Wes, Mariko Tamaki's been better on Detective than we thought she would be? I'll agree with you. It's better than I anticipated. But still, Detective Comics is a big brand. That's one of their big titles. It's a big seller. That was a risk I'm surprised they took, but they almost had to. Look at the names that are gone from DC Comics now. James Tynion, essentially Scott Snyder. He's still doing a couple projects there, but he's got his Best Jacket Press thing going right now, and they're making a lot of comics that ain't at DC. Tony Daniel, totally associated with Batman. Jeff Johns, the best DC Comics writer, in the modern era. Gary Frank, one of the best artists in the modern era. Peter J. Tomasi, another one of the best writers. He does not get the acclaim he deserves, but that's, who gets DC Comics characters better than Peter Tomasi? Jeff Johns and maybe Robert Menditti. Maybe. Dan Jurgens, maybe. It's a very short list. Jason Fabok. Batman 3 Jokers. Jason Fabok was the artist. Jeff Johns was the writer. Was shipping 300,000 issues per 300,000 comics per issue. They couldn't get a call back from DC Comics. That's how weird that company has got. The editors that they've lost, Mark Doyle, Jamie Rich, Brian Cunningham, all associated with the biggest titles at DC Comics, all shown the door. Mark Doyle's at IDW, Jamie Rich at Tapas, Brian Cunningham is working with Jeff Johns at Image Comics. Marvel Comics has been affected less. Nick Spencer has gone over to Substack. We see Jonathan Hickman is likely moving over to Substack. And we've seen some of the long-term Marvel kind of writers are starting to dip their toe in over at DC Comics. Perhaps they pay a little bit more. I'm not really sure. But we've heard specifically in an interview, Chip Zdarsky, who I think is one of the better writers in all of comics, writes a hell of a Spider-Man. They asked him, why aren't you doing Spider-Man? I don't want to do Spider-Man. I want to do lower profile characters so I continue to work on my creator-owned stuff and with less corporate oversight and interference. I don't want to work on a character like that. I want to do my own thing. And we're still waiting for some of the fallout with Marvel Comics. We've seen the fallout as far as Disney. There's been a lot of firings, but Marvel Comics, for the most part, have been impervious to this point. It's coming. We're waiting for it. And here's a hot tip. I'm still quite certain that we'll see Sana Amanat on that list when it happens. Nobody believes me. It's going to happen. But I have heard rumors that recently their entire marketing department was gutted. It's like David Gabriel and a couple of other people now. So there have been some firings there. We're just not sure to what extent they are yet. And then you see like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, they're on pace to break records. We've seen Dale Keown, Shane Davis, Aaron Lepresti. Sounds like Brett Booth is going to be going over to Kickstarter or Indiegogo as well. He's also working on a Patreon model. So we're seeing a lot of these these key veteran artists and writers. They're leaving and doing their own thing. Or DC Comics no longer afford to hire them, and they're going to do their own thing. It's crazy. Just the state of the big two because of the pandemic shutdown. Then we think about distribution. My goodness. Has anything been more disruptive than distribution? When the pandemic shutdown happened, Diamond had a firm grasp on a monopoly over the entire comic book industry as far as distribution. They would not have opened up after 6 or 7 weeks of the pandemic shutdown. They would have continued to stay down if DC Comics did not announce they were bringing on Lunar and UCS as alternative distributors. Of course, in the end, we know that DC ended up dropping Diamond altogether, except for overseas. They still work with Diamond and go with Lunar and UCS, and then UCS ended up dropping out, so it's just Lunar now. But DC Comics really started a domino effect by making that big change, breaking up that monopoly, which was really holding comic books back. I cannot overstate how precarious a monopoly like Diamond on distribution of comic books in North America left the entire industry. If they were to just go out of business, what would have happened? There would have been nobody ready to distribute comics. Now, we do know that DC was able to bring up Lunar pretty fast, but it wasn't overnight. It took a little while. So now we've got DC partnered with Lunar. I believe Scout Comics is with them as well. Marvel also has decided to leave Diamond Comics, and they've got a new deal with Penguin Random House, one of the biggest publishers and distributors of books in the world. Certainly, they think they are in North America. Insane how big this deal is, and it's going to be kicking off, I believe, next month. It's going to be huge. Marvel has specifically been holding back certain titles so they can have a huge launch when Penguin Random House goes out. We have no idea the opportunities that this is going to open up for Marvel as far as distribution and getting their comic books and their characters in new places as far as digests and things like that. This could end up being one of the biggest deals in Western comics history. We don't know yet. We haven't heard all the details, but this is a game changer. And it's certainly a game changer for Diamond Comics. Diamond Comics distributors are the distributors of indies now, or they will be next month. And a wholesaler of Marvel, and I believe they're going to have an opportunity to wholesale DC Comics as well. This is definitely going to negatively affect retailers because they're losing out on all their discounts that they received when they were buying in bulk from Diamond. They could buy their comic books, they could buy the collectibles and everything, and get a freight discount on the weight, depending on the size of their orders. That's negative, unfortunately. That's driving up costs for the retailers. Probably within like 6 months, they'll know how the new market works, and they'll adjust what they're doing to best serve their customers and their bottom line and keep the doors open. But we're also seeing Substack, major deals signed with James Tynion, Nick Spencer, Jonathan Hickman, Scott Snyder. Comixology, an enormous deal signed with Scott Snyder. 8 new original comics coming online. Substack, Comixology, investing heavily in digital comics, something that neither DC and Marvel were willing to do. This is important. Opening up new markets, potentially bringing in new readers. This is what the industry needs. And it's a new model of distribution. Now, you could always buy comics digitally, but this is going to be their bread and butter. That's what's been really holding DC and Marvel back. They're a physical publisher that also does digital. Substack and Comixology are digital publishers. That's what their specialty is going to be. Hopefully this takes things to the next level. We'll see how it works out. I'm excited for this change. We've also got Tapas coming in, from the Asian market, heavily investing in digital, bringing in DC Comics Michelle Wells, former EIC. She was the co-EIC with Marie Javins for a few months before they decided to go with Marie and let Michelle go. She's been brought online. Jamie Rich, who was the former editor mostly associated with Tom King, he's been brought on board with Tapas. They're investing in the Western comic market. All these platforms are moving into the U.S. market because they see all this growth and they see all this opportunity as DC and Marvel sit there and languish with their old, outdated ideas and models on how to run comic books. Manga has changed the game. They've shown people that there's another way and that people are frothing at the mouth for new comic book content that they can get their hands on. But DC and Marvel just aren't distributing it the correct way. I think we're going to see them have to, change. They're going to have to update the way that they're doing things if they're going to be able to compete in this new market. Yes, they do have the best, most well-known characters with the best stories, which are all convoluted, out there. But that's not going to be enough to compete. There's already 80 years worth of great Batman stories. You got to bring something new to the table. And Substack, Comixology, Tapas, and a lot of other platforms are coming in here. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, all wanting to take down, maybe not take down, but compete with DC and Marvel for that U.S. comic market. And with manga, which is certainly a force to be reckoned with in the bookstore market, outside of the direct market. And can you imagine this? It's felt like for the last decade, everything at DC, Marvel, and all the other publishers, even Valiant and some of the other ones, have all been dictated by movies, right? Movies were the lifeblood of comic books somehow. And they were what was moving things forward. If you got a movie out, that character was going to get featured. They were going to start, heavily featuring those characters and stories and stuff. Movies are no longer guaranteed cash cows like they were. Even when the DCEU was bombing in their estimation, they weren't losing money. And we're seeing that it's likely happening now. Marvel Studios could release Ant-Man and make $700 million. Right? Ant-Man's a cool character. I like Paul Rudd. But it's not the Avengers. It's not Iron Man. It's not Captain America. You know, Black Widow's now performing under expectations. There are literally no expectations moving forward for the Eternals and Shang-Chi. What's the next big Marvel movie? I think we got Spider-Man, Far From Home, No Way Home. I don't know. Whatever the new Spider-Man movie is, and then you got Doctor Strange. But those are a ways out when we're finally going to get to see those. You can no longer bank on the movies creating interest or really bringing in revenue right now. Just look what happened with Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman 84. They both guaranteed to have lost enormous amounts of money. It's crazy this has happened, but it's all about streaming now. And that's why they lost money, because they decided to distribute Wonder Woman 84 and Suicide Squad, you know, for the fee of HBO Max simultaneously as the theater release. They've lost so much money on these deals. Disney has taken a different approach. If you have Disney Plus and they have 100 million subscribers, for the fee of $30, you can still watch, you know, Black Widow and the other movies, you know, at home, Mulan, stuff like that. So at least they're charging a fee, and they have, you know, like 9 times more subscribers. You know, I think HBO Max has like 12 million right now. It's crazy that they went this route. But it's all about streaming now. Movies are no longer the driving force of comic books. At least they aren't going to be, at least for the short term. And I imagine it's going to be more like the long term. It's streaming. It's all about those MCU shows on Disney Plus now. We got WandaVision, Falcon Winter Soldier. We got Loki. We've got Hawkeye coming up later this year. We've got Miss Marvel coming in next year. We got a host of other projects coming up, like She-Hulk. It's all going to be based on and focused towards streaming, because the movie industry has just been decimated and it has not recovered. And they can no longer bank on these movies just going out there, even if they're bad and poorly received, and making money at a profit at a minimum. You know, HBO Max is going to go full blast into DC characters. They already have. We know that they've got a Green Lantern series and some other projects out there. It's all about streaming now. It's not going to be about movies anymore. It's crazy. Could you have imagined that being the case in the comic book industry like 18 months ago? Or, you know, maybe 20 months ago? That movies wouldn't be the focal point of what everybody was talking about. It's going to be streaming moving forward, because the movie market, the movie industry is so volatile right now. Do you think anybody else they're ever going to spend $190 million on a Suicide Squad movie again? They might do it in 15 years, but it ain't happening anytime soon. So it's just crazy when you think about how everything has changed so much. And if you can remember anything or anything I left out, you definitely put it in the comments section. I definitely want this to be a conversation. The game has changed. The comic book game has changed. Are DC and Marvel going to be able to keep up with it? Feels like the creators have spoken. They don't think so. They want a new model. They want new opportunities, and they want to control their own destiny. They want to control the rights to the things that they create. They want opportunities to cash in on them when they go to streaming. And we're going to see a lot of comic books material on streaming soon. It's always been a huge part of streaming, and it's going to become a bigger part of streaming. Distribution's never been different. We've got people going the entire digital route, where we'll get the trades later. We got people, you know, stuck in the old models like DC and Marvel, but they've got new distribution methods. What's Penguin Random House going to bring to the deal? We're not really sure yet. You know, Tapas has gotten in the market, Substack, Comixology. We got Indiegogo and Kickstarter getting bigger every single year. It's crazy when you think about it. The comic game has changed. I'm glad I'm here for it. I'll definitely continue covering it here on the channel, but just want to talk about this today, and I'll definitely have Perch in sometime this week, because there's a couple of things I want to talk to him about. So look forward to that. I really appreciate it, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm sorry I'm glistening, but it is so hot here in the Philippines. My goodness, it's hot.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat po, and I'm out.